Hello and welcome to Sassy as Fuck. I'm John McGreevy. I'm joined by my co-host Alex Radford. I nearly fucked that up, but I'm just going to power it on through. And today we're joined by Marc Bitanga, Fractional CMO for B2Bs. Thank you very much, Marc, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Thank you. So for an intro, I'm taking that as being I think it was only half fucked up. So I'm really going to take that.
I think it's best to just assume, half fucked up is just kind of what the podcast seems to be.
Don't worry,
anyway.
you just got the flubs out of the way. Don't worry about
exactly,
it.
Exactly.
From here.
Yeah, like I'm not professional enough to just power. What I will do is I will announce what I'm powering through. So anyone listening, I basically bring attention to the mistake. It's it's really the opposite of professionalism and actually kind of doing the right thing. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. If anyone's listening, they'll be realising very quickly that we have done our intro with the guest Marc here with us, which was the first time doing it. I was surprisingly nervous, but it went surprisingly well. But I'm going to kick off, Marc, by asking a very important question, a question I've had for years, a question that I have been intrigued by for a long time. What is a fractional CMO?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Fractional CMO is essential. So let's talk about agency and let's talk about consulting, and then we'll talk about fractional CMO.
Yeah.
Right? So agencies usually come in and support a marketing program, a specific part of the marketing program. So whether let's say it's a creative, you need some commercials, you need some creative for social media or paid media. That's the agency model. And with the agency model, generally speaking, you have a senior person, then you have an account manager, and then you have the doers. The senior person rarely interacts with a client. Usually just shows up for like the call once a month or something like that, right? So they're solving a specific need within a gap within the marketing team, right? Consultants similarly are usually brought in specifically to help with a portion of marketing. Let's say it's demand generation, or let's say it's social media. So it's broader context, generally speaking. And in that particular case, let's say more seasoned consultants have a framework. This is how I approach a client. I have a lather, rinse, repeat process, and it's generally part of their intellectual property. Like this is the framework why consultant A is better than consultant B.
Yeah.
Right? Fractional CMO, if you can kind of think about it, is the other end of that scale, where you are essentially a peer to the CEO. You're a peer to the other C-level executives. You are at the table providing feedback on the strategy, providing feedback on why you should go path A or path B. You're not taking the directive of, particularly with marketing, you're not taking the directive. You're the one who's actually putting forward the directive for the business. And it's quite different in that way where with fractional CMOs, there's been this discussion online amongst fractional executives, can you scale a fractional practice? I would say most people would say no. And that's the reason why there's tremendous value, because you have direct access to the most senior marketing person. And you are talking at a boardroom level to a marketing person. And the term fractional implies basically, I'm going to be working with you a quarter of the time.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be working on retainer. And that's the fractional part. I think it's a term that is new to some folks, and in some arenas it's overused. I remember I was in Silicon Valley. I was doing a business development trip last year, actually, in San Francisco and San Jose, and I joined a networking kind of event that they have it feels like 50 of them a week over in Silicon Valley. And we just had to write those name tags when it says what you do. And I was writing this name tag, and this kind lady who was saying hello to everybody, she's like, "Oh, fractional CMO. Yeah, there's about 50 of them in there." I got to position myself differently here.
Oh, gosh.
So, but hopefully that gives you better clarity about what a fractional CMO is and the type of value you bring to the table to a business.
I think it does, because I think like when I first heard it and first like Googled what, and like obviously look it up, and there's a million different people explain it different ways, and you explained it the best way I've seen. And that I think before I kind of assumed it's just like it's just a Ponzi word for you're a freelance marketer, or you're just a marketer for hire. But actually, the C-level bit is where it makes a difference. Is that, like you say, a consultant or a freelance marketer, or so that will. They come in and they're treated very much as a resource. You pass things off to them and don't really have any. You're not giving them any authority. You're basically giving them a problem to solve and letting them kind of solve it normally. But as a CMO, you're coming in, like you say, you're going into the C-level. The biggest question that jumps out to me though is that a difficult thing? If you go into a company as a fractional CMO, do you struggle to get people to treat you? At the level you are, you're coming in as a CMO, as a C-level. Do you struggle for people to treat you that way?
I think sometimes, and let's. So just to add on a little bit extra color in terms of the difference with a fractional CMO as opposed to let's say a consultant. A consulting team, most of the part, they're not just strategy, they're doers. They're actually executing, right? So let's say, for example, you bring in a social media consultant. They're the one charting the strategy for a portion of marketing, and they're also, to a degree, doing the work.
Yeah.
With a fractional CMO, you're brought in as the C-level executive or the VP level of executive that you can have candid conversations with with the rest of the C-level team. That's first and foremost. And for the most part, you shouldn't be the doer. You should be building the muscle needed within the organization, or developing the muscles. And when I see muscles, like the team itself, you should be a fractional CMO in its purest form is basically we're determining the strategy based on the course the business wants to get to, and these are the resources we need, and I'm going to oversee the team essentially. Back to your question around buy-in or respect. I think the only one I really come across is a common misunderstanding is a client thinks a fractional CMO is just another title for consultant.
Yeah.
And so they expect not just strategy, but also execution.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to be fair, that's not just the case with fractional CMOs. There's a lot of job descriptions out there. Like, take a look at full-time job descriptions. You've got head of growth that basically throws the kitchen sink at an individual. And by the way, you're not going to have a team at all. You're doing all these things. So I don't think it's endemic to just being a fractional CMO, but occasionally I'll come across and would have to set those boundaries. And quite frankly, from the fractional executives part, that's an expectation you need to set right at the outset before signing on a client. Hey, I'm coming in as strategy. I'm going to be working with the team, and even for myself as I craft my business, tenfold. One of the things that I try to set expectations with is I will only work with clients that have these types of resources.
Yeah.
So for the most part, it hasn't been an issue, but occasionally we'll have to have that clarifying conversation.
I guess it's that thing where it's if you have that problem, the conversations probably weren't the right conversations before that and leading into it. And so as long as you've had those right conversations, expectations are clear, you're going to be okay.
Well, like I like to position it like this. Like, sometimes they'll go, okay, you're going to be doing social media too, right? Well, I go, yeah, if you want me to write a post, social media, LinkedIn post for $300 an hour, that's not the best. That's not the best use of my time. And so when you position it that way, they understand. Oh, okay, that's not part of the deal, so to speak.
I was going to ask, is it fair to say that in this kind of aspect of fractional CMO, that it allows you to kind of almost have a step back and look at the broader strategy within the kind of the marketing sphere, instead of being like, you've got the experience of, the marketing manager or the marketing director for a company where you're focusing on just like the software development company, let's say. instead of being like just that specific focus, you've got a more kind of a broader subject matter, and you're able to kind of look at it more holistically. Is it fair to say that?
Yes, 100%. And this, let me peel back the onion layers, because there's more depth to that question or statement.
Yeah,
right?
Of course, yeah.
So to directly answer your question, absolutely. When you walk through the door, you want to know, the first thing you want to know is, where does the business itself want to go, and why this direction? And it should be an expectation that there should be some feedback, there should be some input, there should be, well, that's path A, but you could do path B. I'll give you an example. I was working with one brand or client, and they wanted to pursue government as their main market.
Yeah.
And I said, I understand why you want to pursue government, but this is what you're going to come across. And here's the litany of roadblocks and speed bumps you're going to come across trying to sell to government. And so that's not a marketing conversation. That's a strategy, a business strategy conversation that infused with marketing expertise and informed with marketing expertise can help guide that decision making. So 100%, that's the case. And I think that in terms of the frustrations that I hear from CEOs and founders in working with who they believe is a marketing executive is boardroom members, they talk in revenue. They talk in growth. They talk in efficiencies in terms of, customer acquisition cost.
Yeah.
Marketing leaders to a certain seniority level talk about, engagement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or sentiment.
Yeah.
Or reach, which those are great things, but that's language you use amongst marketers. That's not necessarily the language that a CEO wants to hear at a boardroom level. They just want to understand, generally speaking, and I'm going to hyper generalize.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, C-level executives, they just want to know, how are you going to contribute to these KPIs that we need to do? Yeah. They may be curious about how you're going to get there, but for the most part, that's really what they care about. Yeah. And that's the difference between a fractional CMO and, let's say, a consultant, because typically a consultant, the directive at the company level has already been set. You are just here because I believe that you will contribute to the company directive, versus a fractional CMO, or any fractional executive for that part, will assess that directive, look at it 5 different ways, and also say, great, thumbs up. I'm all green lights. Or wait a second, there's a couple of things that you might want to think about here.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, I get immediately kind of terrified by it. Cause like I'm a content strategist. I write, and to me, the last thing I want is to be in C-level conversations. The last thing I want to be asked specific questions about content, about what's going to be in it, what the tone is going to be. I want to just to talk about specifics. I don't want to be at that high level bit. I want to be like content strategy. Sure, I can go to that level, but those kind of bits where it goes down to review and stuff like that, because I think for me, especially like on the content side, that's where people expect promises and numbers, and like, well, how much revenue will this blog post generate? I'm like, maybe none. I don't know. It's going to be good content. I don't know. So that to me is like the opposite. Like you say, it's the opposite end of the spectrum of like consultant versus that. Because I could have I very actually have a consultant level relationship with clients, whereas you have much kind of higher level and much more. Like you say, it's a waste of money for you to be sat there writing a social post or going into the weeds of it. And instead you have to kind of, it's, C-level is decision makers, right? So you're there to kind of advise and make decisions and say, this is what's best for the long-term strategy. But, they don't have the time for you to go into and explain why the tone of voice of your blog posts matters.
Yeah, 100%. Fun fact, when I started out my career or back in college, I actually wanted to be a graphic designer.
Okay.
I was drawn to the creative aspect of marketing, only to realize that creatives didn't have a lot of influence in terms of the broader strategy. Like if you told me when I was 20, hey, by the way, you're going to be in Excel spreadsheets half your life as a marketer, I probably would have done something else.
Run to the hills. Yeah.
Because quite frankly, yes, marketing executives and fractionals, they need to have that expertise to be able to guide the marketing program, guide the team, speak the language that the team is accustomed to, but they also need to be very comfortable at that executive level to justify why I'm asking you for a $10 million budget, to justify why I'm completely pivoting this, this next quarter in terms of marketing strategy and what I deem the impact will be. I'll give you an insight into a recent conversation that I've had with a client. As an example, the client has challenges with their current marketing program. And we can make incremental tweaks, but those incremental tweaks will take a little bit longer to fully take effect. You could have multiple experiments, what have you. That particular strategy is an incrementality, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it protects the revenue of the business. Versus if your risk tolerance is really high, I could completely pivot the marketing program, but I can't guarantee that it won't tank maybe 50% of our revenue for the first month because this is something entirely new. Those are the types of conversations that are happening that most marketers, as a consultant, don't get to have that conversation.
Yeah, I 100%. You talked before about the creativity side of it, and like graphic design. Alex does some graphic design. I'm useless at it. I can use Canva though, but I think when I went into being a writer, same thing of being like, oh great, it's a creative endeavor. And then I think the moment that was like the wake up call for me was when I included a line that said like, just at the end of the intro, now on to the fun bit. And the comment from the client was, too whimsical, remove. I was like, oh, it's not a creative. I've got very stringent guidelines to do. And like you say, when you are at kind of more the consultant level or the freelance level, you don't really have decisions to make. It's more about identifying what guidelines you've got to go down and negotiating that. And it's a very different thing. And even though I think we all dream of those creative roles being creative, you're right, they're not actually. And actually, there's more probably creativity a lot of the time at that C level, at that strategy level. Even though you're in spreadsheets and stuff, you're still having more power to actually say, well, let's try this. Whereas the further down you go, you don't really get that.
Let me burst your bubble a little bit here, John. Fractional executives as well as CMOs themselves, we come across the very same challenges that creatives do, just at a different magnitude, if I can call it that. And this is just sample size of one, but what I've observed is, for example, when I'm working with a career CEO who didn't found the company, who's there to make a number go up, for the most part, they bring on someone like myself to make the creative decisions and trust us because I would be accountable for the number, not how it got done.
Yeah.
But if I'm working with a founder or co-founder or co-founding team who started off in their spare bedroom or garage, put blood, sweat, and tears into the company and put blood, sweat, and tears into the brand, when I put myself in their position, that's my baby. Like that's their baby. Yeah. And they will have very specific feedback on the direction of the brand. And I've had to learn over the course of my career to really be cognizant of that dynamic and be more of a guide as opposed to trying to force something through.
Yeah, you're not coming in as a buccaneer, walking in and going, this is the brand new thing we're going to do. Let's change that logo. Let's do this. It's more, this is what you've already established. Let's kind of how to kind of, I guess, carry on the same road in the most part.
Well, maybe not carry on the same road, but still have the essence of the founder's brand, whilst still evolving the brand in a direction that just makes sense. Like I'll give you an example. if I had $10 for every time a client said, I want to be like Apple, I want Apple's website, I'd just roll my eyes all the time. First of all, Apple's Apple. You can't out Apple.
Yeah, they've done that already. It's fine.
They've already done that.
Yeah, tick.
But from a practical sense, whenever I hear that from a founder, I kind of logically put forward the argument of our color palette is not enough. We're not going to have all the colors we need in terms of the buy button. If the buy button is gray all the time and we can't experiment out of that color palette because that's the Apple brand. So it's that kind of guidance that, as opposed to, nope, I disagree that we should, it's more of education and guiding that conversation.
So what would be your kind of, because this is a problem, in SaaS especially, there's a big problem. Most SaaS landing pages, they look and they read like Trello's landing page in 2014. What is if you're going into that situation, how do you try and actually lead? Because if it's safe, right? For a lot of companies, it's safe to look at the competitors or look at the big boys in the industry and go, well, let's just look like them. And you see it in every industry. It's not a SaaS specific problem, but you see it a lot in SaaS because there's so many. How do you go in there and actually have a conversation that obviously, like you say, you're not going in and saying no, because that doesn't help. If you go in there and say no, then you probably don't get hired in the first place. But if you go in there and how do you steer that conversation towards maybe let's not be like other people? How would you broach that with somebody you're working with?
Remind me to give you, a little bit of an example in terms of, copying your competitors. We'll get back to that. I like to what I'd like to call a tip of the spear approach, which is give me a little bit of an inch and I can give you a foot back. Meaning, give me a little bit of wiggle room to prove that this approach might work. And then I'll have the credibility within the organization to be even more adventurous, let's say. And apart from that, it's also the data. It's hey, we've tried a million things. This is what we've got. Then, hey, we need to go try something radically different if you've already tried a million things. But back to the anecdote around senior level executives say, I want to be like them. I recall a conversation with a fellow marketing executive. We used to be competitors and we were just at a conference, just kind of shooting the breeze, right? And they said something like, hey, that campaign that you guys run, we copied that because we liked it. And I was like, that was a horrible campaign. It didn't work. And that was just a great reminder for even myself, because we're all prone to, FOMO. We're all prone to looking at over the fence to say, whoa, their lawn looks better than mine. But I remember having that conversation. I was just like, oh man, that's a great reminder not to try to copy people just because you think it's better. Yeah.
You don't know. You don't have the same numbers they've got, and so if you look at something and go, that copy's great, like maybe we don't know. Like even as a copywriter, I don't know when you write a line of copy and go, it reads cool, it looks good, I think it'd be good, but until you actually run it, you've no idea. That's absolutely valid. Some campaign might look awesome, but I love that it'd be commented. You're like, have it, it's yours.
Exactly.
So what are for you? You mentioned before about the different kind of types of company. Who is your ideal type of company to work for? Who is, if you were kind of obviously without saying you don't want to work for this, but who would be the ideal size, age, etc. of a company that you like to work for? Who you where you can come in and feel like you have the biggest impact?
And this is obviously going to be different for every fractional executive or even full-time executive, right? For me personally, I like working with organizations with business models where marketing has revenue, drives revenue, meaning they have a significant, they're the growth engine of the organization, as well as the data to be able to influence decisions. And so just that one simple constraint lends to SaaS very, very well, lends to direct to consumer very, very well, because it's mostly, for the most part, a digital transaction. Obviously, there's going to be sometimes with enterprise you're going to have sales support or what have you, but it's much more logic driven as opposed to emotionally driven. And what you'll notice is I didn't say, oh, I'd love to work for a CPG brand. Because, well, first and foremost, I would probably be frustrated if I was put in that scenario coming from where I'm coming from, because I've got so much data that is directly attributable. So I think for me, B2B SaaS is a great spot, as well as direct to consumer, because marketing needs to be the growth engine of the organization.
Yeah, I think we talked to Jane, who's the founder at Userlist, the email platform, and that's what I really love about their software, is that's because it's an email platform for SaaS. You can do so much more because, like you say, the data's there. In most places, when you're selling things in the supermarket, you don't know very much about what people are picking up. You can gather some information, but with something like SaaS, you have the data there. You know what they've already clicked on. You know what they've done. You know what features they haven't touched yet, things like that. And so you've got so much more data to actually play with and work with and act on. So you can direct your marketing towards, oh, we have users who have signed up with a free trial but haven't even used this feature yet. Okay, we can direct them to it and things like that. So having that data makes a huge difference when it comes to what you can actually do with marketing. Otherwise, without that data, I guess it forces you to be a bit more broad, and it forces you to take a step back to a certain degree.
I'll give you an example of an interesting exchange. I was working for a major video game company, and we were redesigning a website for one of the games that we were working on. And they brought in, one of the creative directors had brought in an agency from, I believe, Norway or Finland, somewhere, some obscure agency. Yeah. And I remember I was overseeing digital marketing for that particular engagement. And they were suggesting a homepage with all these floaty bits. There was no buttons. There's just like it looked great if it was in the Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to sell something on the website, not the best experience, right? And so I think I gravitate towards businesses with a lot of data. Because data is the currency that marketers use to get real currency.
Yeah. It sounds as though it's kind of like a measurement of like high amount of data allows you to make more measured risks. It's kind of like almost like a puzzle that you're able to solve, and you're able to go, well, because you mentioned previously that you can make these small adjustments and you can make these larger pivots that might be a bit more risky. Is it that the data helps guide that process for you? Is that kind of the enjoyment there from that, or how does it work? How do you effectively make these risky decisions, knowing that
I have a perfect example for you, Alex.
Perfect.
I recall a time where an executive had great success with one company, and that one particular SaaS company was using radio ads.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
And I remember, and I love this executive. We're still connected. We still exchange messages once in a while. He'd do flybys, at my desk as an open concept office. Imagine this, open concept office. Nobody has walls. Wow. And he'd just do flybys of like, hey, what about those radio ads, huh? Like trying to get me to do radio ads.
Yeah.
Now you got to keep in mind that this product was 100% digital product. You buy it with a credit card, and it was a completely different market than what we were. His market was than we were. And I remember he did that for like, I don't know, it felt like a year. Like every a couple times a week, and it became a little bit of a running joke. He'd come and walk by, he's like, have you thought about radio ads?
Yeah.
And it got to the point where, okay, let's consider this. And I worked with one of our data analysts, and we did what's called a sensitivity analysis.
Okay.
In order for these radio ads to produce this much result, we would need to invest this much radio ads in radio ads, and this many people have to then go to their computer, and then this many people. And so you kind of paint a picture of all the things that need to line up in order for that radio ad to work. Yeah. And then you're going to find somewhere in there sometimes, I'll use fake data just to make a point. Yeah. That landing page has to convert at 100% in order for this to work.
Yeah.
And so that's one way of using data. Like, that's not data that we have. It's just, it's data. We've got the baselines. Here's the what ifs. Do you believe that we can achieve 20x click-through rate on this? Or like, so that's one example of using data to substantiate a particular direction.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess that ties directly into what you said before about the spearhead approach. So what you said before is that thing of like, the tip of the spear. You've got a little bit. If you've got that, the data then gives you that chance to actually go, look, in the same way you can go, that's not the best direction. In the same way you can go, give me a little bit of wiggle room. Then you can then use that same data to go, look, that's working. And then you can have that extra room. That's how you kind of get that foot in the door and start to open it up.
That's perfect segue, tip of the spear approach. The compromise was we did podcast advertising, and this is the early days when there were no podcast agencies, and adding ads was not as easy as it is today. And so that was one example of a compromise we made where, great, we'll take a significantly less budget, try this very similarly with a much more focused target market, and see how it goes. But yes, having a tip of the spear approach on both sides, whether you want to try to further the program and trying to put a wedge in there to do something bigger, or to prove or disprove in this case that this tactic isn't one that's viable. Because marketing executives will always get feedback. We just get feedback in a different language. Right. And so there was this meme that I saw on LinkedIn. Someone put a post and said, marketing's great because everybody gives you feedback. Isn't that wonderful? You don't escape it. Neither do marketing executives.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually quite reassuring to me. That's something at least. Yeah, I think my head kind of goes like, when I open a document up and there's like 20 or 50 comments on it, and it's like, it's good to know that happens in different ways, all the way up the chain. That's it makes me feel a little bit better about it, because I think like you kind of find yourself day to day going, this is a me problem, but that's much better that way.
Yeah, for sure. So
what was your actual journey then? To kind of, obviously we talked about what a fractional CMO is and kind of the companies you work with like that. How did you get to that point? Because like you say, like it hasn't always been a term. And so how did your career go from, what did you do early on that kind of led you into that role?
I've had a pretty unique journey, I would think. I actually started out in IT. So coming out of college, back in, I'm totally dating myself here. Back in the late 90s, around the time of the first .com boom, I went into IT because that was the thing you do. That's like, if you wanted to ascend really quickly, you go work for a startup, and then 3 years later, you're going to be a millionaire. That was the promise anyways.
Yeah.
And during that time, I was an analyst. And I was doing a lot of what we would call digital marketing today. I was taking a look at web data, making recommendations, taking a look at user experience, which was all in IT at that time. And then digital marketing started to come up. And I knew I wanted to be a future VP of marketing or CMO. And the approach that I took was, okay, I'm going to build out my marketing tool belt. So I started out in SEO. Okay. I launched my own e-commerce website and wrote all the code in HTML on Notepad. I specifically tried to acquire knowledge and expertise and get to mastery of that before I moved on to the next. So I did that over my 20-year career to the point where, for the most part, I had a semblance of how everybody's jobs were done within marketing, so that I can kind of see the forest for the trees in terms of how to lead a team, how to work directly with creatives, how to work with analysts, how to work with paid media people. And it's been great that way, at least for me, because it's just the way that I operate. Some folks are quite different. They specialize in one area really, really strongly, like brand, and then they hire, to a counterpart on their team to balance out, let's say, performance marketing. Yeah. In my particular case, I've been very much early on in the performance marketing realm, and then now over the last 10 years have started to take on more brand strategy.
Do you find, and this is obviously, I'm sure you're going to want to be diplomatic about this, but do you find, because I've until more recently, I've been very active on LinkedIn until I got locked out. But so I see different fractional CMOs there, and like you look at, you can look at your CV and see, the experience there. You can see the growth and how you get that experience. Have you found that some of your competitors, some people that call themselves fractional CMOs, don't have that breadth of experience? It kind of feels like some people kind of just go, I'm a fractional CMO, and aren't necessarily able to back it up. And feel free to be as diplomatic or undiplomatic as you want with your answer.
Sure. I think at a client level, I don't feel the need to justify my experience at a client level, because I believe my clients are intelligent. They'll take a look at my CV, they'll take a look at my experience, and they'll make their own deduction to say, yep, this guy's been around the block. Yeah. He's done all these different things. For example, I help go-to-market strategy for mainland China, like grow the paid media program over 40 countries. Those are very executive-esque levels of experience. And so I completely trust my clients because they're intelligent. They can see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Now, from a branding level, fractional CMO, that's where it gets diluted. That's where it gets, hey, there's 50 of them in there. Scratching on my name tag, trying to figure out how to position myself in this particular meetup. So, amongst us here and like, there's nobody listening. It's just us three. So I can say this, it's frustrating at a branding level, but frankly, when it comes down to, at a client level, I don't see it's an issue.
I think that's fair. I think that shows. I think that more than anything else, it shows confidence. Because I think that's the important thing, is that you have to be confident in your ability, and you clearly are. And like you say, I think you're going to get caught out anyway. If you're bullshitting a bit and you think you can just slap a name on it and it'll be fine, that's not going to work out. And like I see it with writers the same way. Like in the day, some writers can write, some can't, and very quickly a bad writer's found out. Very quickly a bad CMO's found out. Very quickly a bad producer's found out. Very quickly people will see that stuff, because if the work's not up to scratch, or their portfolio or their history doesn't back it up, then people see that pretty quickly. So I think that some people might see it as a bit of a get rich quick scheme, in a way of being like, if I just call myself this, like, I can ride off people like you or coattail. But I think, you're right, is that if most people you work with will very quickly either cut on, probably before they've even had a conversation, never mind after they start working with you.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, there's just so much more information for anybody to figure out who the right person to work with. Like, example, this podcast, I'm pretty sure at some point in time it's going to come up in someone's buying journey when they're considering me for an engagement. And so there's plenty of information that a client can determine, okay, is this the right fit for us?
Yeah, I think that's it. And like you say, everything that comes up, everything that's out there about you becomes your CV, especially nowadays. Nowadays, people are looking at actual CV. People are looking at your website, looking at your LinkedIn, looking at what comes up on the Google search results. Then that's the thing that's going to make the difference.
You can't hide in the internet. The internet is a very, very big village.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
I Googled myself today and it came up with an awful blog. When I used to be a software tester, a blog from like 11 years ago that was awful. I was like, oh, I don't have the credentials to take it down anymore. It's just now I've just got my old blog post just stuck in the internet, just floating around there that I can't take down. It's a real problem, Mark.
Oh yeah, like I once in a while, just for reputation management, I'll Google myself just to see what pops up. And then on the third or fourth page of Google is my opinions from SEO back in like 2005. And I'm just cringing at it. I'm like looking at you idiot.
Yeah. How do I
what were you
report
saying?
this?
How do I block this and get this out?
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on and chatting to us and explaining to me what a fractional CMO is. And I think it's like I said, there's lots of expressions out there, but you've explained it perfectly, and it's kind of given me a real understanding and admiration as well. Because I think that, like I said, you can easily diminish it and go, it's just another freelancing, but it isn't. That's a role that I do not want. It's a role that would terrify me, and so a huge respect for that, and that it is. So thank you so much for coming on. Before we go though, where can people find you? Where can they follow you, like you, etc.?
I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Just look up my name on LinkedIn. Another way to find me is on my website, growtenfold.co, growtenfold.co.
Nice. Perfect. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Mark.